Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to NK Cheating Story. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Jack Moretti. I'm 38, born and raised in Pittsburgh, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I had it all: a solid job, a nice home, and a beautiful wife named Laura. But that morning, as I sipped my coffee and watched her nearly choke on the newspaper headline, I realized something had shattered. The man in that article, found dead in his garage, wasn't just anyone. He was her secret. And that was the moment I knew my marriage was a lie, and what came next would change everything. Forever. That morning felt like any other, until it wasn't. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and skimming the newspaper. My wife, Laura, was still in the bedroom getting dressed. 5 years of marriage, and for the past few months, we'd become little more than two strangers sharing a roof. Silence had become the third presence at our breakfast table. Then I saw it, right there on the front page. Man found murdered in garage. Robert Dawson, 33, real estate agent at Dawson Realty. Blunt force trauma and strangulation. Police have no suspects. Investigation ongoing. I didn't need to read further. I already knew. Knew because Tony promised me last night. And Tony always keeps his promises. I folded the paper and placed it neatly in front of Laura's seat. A strange calm washed over me. I was sipping my coffee when she walked in, heels clicking softly on the tile floor. Even now, she looked stunning, maybe more beautiful than the day we got married. But beauty is only skin deep. Underneath, something darker had been festering. She didn't greet me. She hadn't in weeks. Just walked over, poured herself a cup of coffee, and sat down. A chill passed through the room. Our eyes met briefly. I gave her a small nod, a ghost of a smile. She didn't return it. Then she picked up the newspaper. Her eyes scanned the headline and froze. The coffee cup trembled in her hand. "Oh God, no," she gasped, spilling the coffee, eyes locked on the article about Robert Dawson. Her face went pale. She shot up and ran toward the bathroom, hand over her mouth. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just watched her go, then calmly rose, rinsed my cup, grabbed my briefcase, and walked out. Her reaction meant nothing to me now. Tony Vitale was my closest friend, more like a brother. Same age, same crew, same trouble. The difference? Tony always got caught. One night, we broke into a warehouse near the docks. We were hoping to score some electronics for quick cash, but the guards spotted us. As we were climbing out with a few boxes of MP3 players, they ambushed us. One of the guards grabbed Tony. I acted fast, smashing a box into the other guard's face, tackling him to the ground. I shouted for Tony to run, and he did, left me behind without looking back. I got caught. The guards roughed me up good, then handed me over to the cops. My face was busted, my ribs ached, but I didn't say a word. Not a peep about Tony. I took the fall alone. 2 weeks in juvenile detention and probation. Tony called me every day, apologizing for running. Said he'd never forget what I did. That he owed me, big time. He was right. My parents were ashamed. My father beat the lesson into me with his belt, then shipped me off to St. Dominic's Catholic school. The nuns and priests there didn't mess around. They broke me down, rebuilt me. By senior year, I was a new man. With a little help, I got into Penn State. Graduated with a degree in human resources. Got a good job. Made my parents proud for once. Then I met Laura. It was at an HR seminar. She was poised, intelligent, magnetic. There was something mysterious about her. We started talking, then dating. She was different from any woman I'd known. Complex, guarded, passionate. I later learned she'd been abandoned as a baby. Raised in foster homes. That explained some of the cracks beneath her perfect surface. Against my parents' warnings, I married her. A small ceremony. No kids yet. We agreed to wait until we were financially stable. She wanted to be a full-time mom one day. The first 2 years were solid. Then came the cracks. In year 3, her company was acquired. She lost her job. Depression hit her hard. She was never the same. When she finally found another position, an office manager job at Dawson Realty, she wasn't excited. She resented it. Resented me. I tried to be supportive, but I started to feel the distance growing. We drifted. And then, her new job, her new friend, Robert. Well, now he's gone. Laura doesn't know it yet, but she's next. I didn't go to work that Monday. I called in sick. Truth is, I wasn't sick. I just needed time to think, to plan, to let the storm settle in my head. Laura hadn't said a word since she'd read the paper. She barely looked at me. She tiptoed around the house like she was walking through a minefield, unsure when the next explosion would come. I wasn't giving her one. Not yet. She wanted to play silent? Good. I could play too. By lunchtime, I made the call. It had been years since I called Tony for a favor. After I got my life together, we drifted apart. He stayed close to the streets, always with one foot in something shady. I went corporate. Button-down shirts, morning meetings, HR seminars. But we never broke the bond. I still remembered his words from all those years ago, after I took the fall alone. One day, Mikey, when you need something, anything, you call me. I don't care what it is. You saved my life. I owe you forever. Well, today was that day. I dialed the number I had memorized, even though I hadn't used it in nearly 5 years. Tony answered on the third ring. Caruso? Yeah, it's time. He didn't ask what for. He just said, where and when. Tonight. Meet me at the old bakery. 10 sharp. The bakery was an abandoned shop on 9th and Carson. It had been our meeting place since high school. No cameras, no nosy neighbors. Just bricks, dust, and memories soaked in teenage rebellion. That night, the wind cut through my coat as I walked toward the back entrance. Tony was already there, leaning against a rusted dumpster, his breath misting in the cold. He looked older, tougher. Still had that same glint in his eye, though. The kind of look that said he'd been places, done things, and didn't lose sleep over any of it. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. I read about it, he said. That scumbag Dawson. That your wife's boy toy. I nodded. She didn't even deny it. I didn't ask, but her face told me everything. Tony lit a cigarette. So what do you want? I want him gone. Tony took a slow drag, the tip of his cigarette glowing like a demon's eye in the dark. That's already done. My jaw clenched. What? I took care of it Friday night. When you called last week, said things were getting bad, I figured this was coming. So I kept an eye on him. He was predictable. Same bar every Friday after work. Same lonely walk to his car. Only took 2 minutes. I stared at him. You didn't even wait for my word. He shrugged. You said you'd call when it was time. I just moved the clock up. My heart pounded. I wasn't ready to feel what I was feeling. Relief. Not guilt. Not hesitation. Not even fear. Just cold, calculated satisfaction. What about cleanup? I asked. Tony smirked. You know me. No prints. No cameras. No witnesses. He's fish food now. I nodded slowly. Good. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just final. Tony's eyes narrowed. What about her? I didn't answer right away. I looked up at the cloudy night sky, the weight of it pressing on me. She doesn't get to walk away. Not after this. He gave me a long, assessing look. You want her gone too? No, I said. Not dead. That's too easy. What then? I want her to suffer. I want her to wake up every day and remember what she threw away. I want her to feel trapped, powerless, alone. Tony flicked his cigarette onto the ground and stepped on it. You've changed, Mikey. No. I just finally stopped pretending I hadn't. He nodded slowly. So what's the play? I've got an idea. But I need help. Discretion. Resources. You got him. We stood in the silence of that broken building for a while, the cold creeping into our bones. Then I turned and walked away. Back home, Laura was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV. Her eyes were blank, unfocused. She didn't even look up when I entered. Dinner's in the fridge, she mumbled. I didn't respond. I walked right past her, into the den, and locked the door behind me. In that room, I poured a whiskey, opened my laptop, and started planning. I knew a guy, Carlos Mendoza. He wasn't a killer, but he was good at disappearing people. He worked in logistics, security, and private relocations. Underground stuff. I'd helped him once years ago with some legal trouble. He owed me too. Tomorrow, I'd call Carlos. Laura thought she had secrets. But now, so did I. By the next morning, my mind was clear. Cold. Focused. Vengeful. I didn't speak to Laura. I didn't need to. She moved around the house like a ghost. Eyes always averted, lips pressed tight. I think she knew something had changed. Something inside me had snapped, and what was left wasn't the man she once married. I waited until she left for work, then made the call. Carlos Mendoza answered on the first ring. You're calling early, Mikey. I need your expertise. He chuckled. You finally need a relocation? No. Someone else does. Dangerous kind, or just dumb? I hesitated. Both. It's my wife. The line went quiet for a second. Then Carlos said, say no more. You want clean or you want memorable? I want legal distance. No blood. No body. But I want her gone, scared, and forgotten. I can work with that, he replied calmly. Fake travel, stolen ID, credible alibi for you. You'll need to do some groundwork, though. Send me everything you have on her. Photos, routine, documents, passport info. If this is going to work, we'll need to make it look like she planned this herself. I already had it ready. I'd scanned her ID, her driver's license, her passport, even her signature from tax documents. When you live with someone for 5 years, you collect a lot of useful pieces. Also, I added, I need her to be seen, confirmed, at an airport. Surveillance, flight logs, the works. Carlos whistled. That'll cost extra, but I've got a woman who can pass for her, at least long enough to fool a few cameras. Do it. By noon, the plan was rolling. Carlos moved fast. That's what I liked about him. No questions, no hesitation. Just efficiency. I transferred the money into his offshore account and waited. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Laura hadn't returned yet. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a glass of bourbon, staring at the door. She came in around 7:30, holding her heels in one hand, her coat draped over the other. Her makeup looked too perfect for someone coming home from a simple day at the office. She froze when she saw me. You're home early, she said, voice tight. So are you, I replied. We stood there, the silence between us loud enough to drown the world. I had dinner with some colleagues, she added casually. Anyone I know? I asked, tilting my head, watching her squirm. She hesitated. No. Liar. I didn't say another word. Just stood up, took my glass, and walked to my office. I could feel her eyes on my back, filled with questions she didn't dare ask. Inside the den, I double-locked the door, sat down, and opened the manila envelope Carlos had sent by courier. Inside were the details of Operation Disappearance. Day 1. Obtain Janet's likeness. Done. Day 2. Set up travel documents, forged ID. In progress. Day 3. Public sighting. Carlos had someone who looked strikingly similar to Laura. They'd film her entering the airport, checking in with a passport under Laura's name, and boarding a flight to Brazil. All timed. All traceable. All verifiable. It would look like Laura took the money and ran. A classic betrayal story. Wife abandons loving husband, empties the account, and vanishes without a word. What no one would know is that she'd never made it to that airport at all. Carlos had another role to play. The extractor. 2 men. Fast car. Public space. No violence. Just a needle, a swap, and a second life beginning without permission. Carlos would keep her somewhere. Where didn't matter to me. She'd be out of my life. That was all I needed. But before the plan went into motion, I needed one final step, an airtight alibi. Thursday night, I'd be at the poker game. The same guys, the same location, the same routine we'd had for years. Witnesses, photos, timestamps. When it happened, I wouldn't be within 10 miles. I set everything in motion with a precision that surprised even me. The logistics, the timing, the paper trail. Carlos said, "You sure you've never done this before?" No, but I've imagined it 1,000 times. Friday morning arrived like thunder in my chest. I played it cool, made coffee, kissed Laura goodbye. She barely reacted. We were just 2 strangers in a house pretending to still be married. By noon, she was gone, and the clock had started ticking. At 4:45 p.m., the Laura lookalike boarded a flight to JFK, then Rio de Janeiro. Cameras caught her at the gate. She smiled at the flight attendant. Passed security. Vanished. Meanwhile, at exactly 4:55 p.m., the real Laura's car was intercepted at a 4-way stop near our neighborhood. 2 cars boxed her in. No escape. The door yanked open. The needle went in. The seatbelt cut. And she was gone before the light turned green. Carlos called me 3 hours later. It's done. I poured myself a drink and stared at the silent living room. My house felt peaceful for the first time in months. No more lies. No more cheating. No more pretending. Only silence and justice. Saturday morning came with gray skies and a hollow quiet. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the seat where Laura used to sip her coffee. Her cup was still there from yesterday, half full, lipstick stained. It felt symbolic now, the last trace of a woman who no longer existed. According to the plan, She was halfway to Rio by now. Of course, in reality, Laura was nowhere near Brazil. She was stashed in a location only Carlos knew. Somewhere out of reach, somewhere far from anyone who'd care to look. She had no phone, no ID, no idea what was coming next. But she was alive for now. That Saturday, I made the call to the police. Hello, yes. I need to file a missing person report. My wife, Laura Kennelly. She didn't come home last night. I haven't been able to reach her. The officer on the line sounded routine, calm. When was the last time you saw her, sir? Yesterday morning, before I left for work. They took down the details, said someone would be in touch. And sure enough, that afternoon, Detective Marcus Denton showed up at my house. He looked like every movie cop you've ever seen. Rumpled suit, tired eyes, carrying the weight of 100 other people's problems. Mr. Kennelly, he greeted me, stepping inside. Mind if I ask you a few questions? I nodded and led him into the living room. We sat opposite each other, the coffee table between us like a negotiation line. He opened a small notepad. Your wife didn't return home Friday night. That's right, I said, lowering my voice. It's not like her. She leave a note? A text? Anything? No, nothing. Any recent arguments between the two of you? I gave him the look of a concerned but composed husband. Not really. Just the usual stress. She's been working a lot. He scribbled something down. Do you suspect she might have left voluntarily? I shook my head slowly. No. I mean, she would have told someone. Her friend Amanda, maybe. But she wouldn't just disappear. Denton studied me for a long second. Do you mind if we take a look around her things? Go ahead, I said, waving toward the stairs. Her closet's still full. Her toothbrush is in the bathroom. You'll see for yourself. He did. After a brief search, he returned, face unreadable. She didn't take her passport. I leaned back. Really? That's strange. He nodded. We'll keep digging. He left shortly after, thanking me for my time. I watched him drive away, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of watching a lie take root and bloom. That night, I poured another drink, turned on the game, and tried to act like any other man on a lonely Saturday. But I couldn't relax. Not yet. I needed to see it for myself. So Sunday morning, I put on my best suit and headed for St. Peter's Church for the 10 o'clock Mass. The same church Laura and I used to attend in better times. Carlos had arranged everything. I was to slip out the side door during communion and wait by the east steps. I sat in the third pew from the back, eyes scanning the room, just in case. But nobody seemed out of place. Nobody suspicious. When the time came, I moved quietly to the side, opened the exit door, and stepped into the sunlight. There it was. A black Ford Crown Victoria idling by the curb. I got in. The driver didn't speak, just drove. We pulled into a warehouse district 10 minutes later. A large steel building, mostly abandoned, with just a single light glowing above a side door. Inside, the smell hit me first. Damp concrete, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The hallway echoed beneath our feet as the driver led me to the back. Carlos was waiting near an office door. You ready for this? He asked. I need to see her. He pushed open the door without another word. There she was. Laura sat in a metal chair, hands bound in front of her, feet tied to the legs of the chair. Her hair was a mess, her face pale. She looked up, eyes wide, like she barely recognized me. But I recognized her, and I remembered everything. I stepped into the room, slowly circling her. She didn't speak. She didn't plead. Maybe she knew it wouldn't matter. You always thought you were smarter than me, I said quietly. Thought I'd never find out. Thought you could humiliate me and walk away untouched. Her lip trembled. But now look at you, I went on. The mighty Laura Kennelly, brought low by her own arrogance. I crouched down, locking eyes with her. This is the life you chose when you chose him, and you'll spend the rest of it thinking about that choice. One tear slid down her cheek. That was all I needed. I stood, nodded at Carlos, and walked out. She was officially gone, and the world would never know what really happened. But I would, and that was enough. Monday came like a quiet storm. Gray skies, cold air, and the faint weight of something heavy that no one could quite name. I arrived at work around 8:30 a.m., briefcase in hand, heart steady. I had rehearsed this day in my mind 100 times. It had to look like any other Monday. Just another man showing up to his job, trying to stay composed while his wife had vanished without a trace. Inside my office, the silence wrapped around me like a second skin. The phone blinked with two missed calls, one from Detective Denton, the other from Amanda, Laura's friend from the agency. I called Denton back first. "Mr. Kennelly," he answered on the first ring. "We may have some updates." "Go on," I said, keeping my tone measured. "We traced your wife's movements from Friday morning. She was seen having coffee at a Denny's on Bennett Street around 10 a.m. Surveillance confirms it." I said nothing, just listened. "She then appeared at Allegan National Bank an hour later. She withdrew $25,000 from your joint savings. Cashier's check. ID and passport checked out. We have surveillance footage." I did my best to sound confused. "That doesn't make sense. Laura never said anything about needing money, and she didn't even take her passport." "Well," he replied, "apparently she did." He paused. "She also had an airline ticket booked to New York and then to Rio de Janeiro. Her car was found in long-term parking at the Pittsburgh airport. She boarded both flights." I took a deep breath, let it out slow. "So, you're telling me my wife left the country?" "That's what it looks like." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "This is madness." Denton's voice softened, just slightly. "Mr. Kennelly, was your wife having an affair?" I waited 2 seconds before responding. "That's absurd." "And yet," he continued, "multiple co-workers suspected a relationship between her and Robert Tolson." "Office gossip," I shot back. "That's not proof." He didn't push, but he didn't drop it either. When the call ended, I closed my eyes. The lie was working flawlessly. Laura's disappearance was no longer suspicious. It was tragic. A woman caught in a downward spiral, maybe tied to a murdered lover. A woman who, by all appearances, had fled the country to escape shame or suspicion. It was almost too perfect. But this wasn't over yet. I still had a part to play. That evening, I stopped by the florist, ordered a bouquet of Laura's favorite lilies, had them sent to her office with a simple note, "Missing you. Love, JC." Then I made a reservation at her favorite restaurant downtown. The maitre d' knew me. I explained that my wife might be late, but asked him to save the table. She never showed. And when I didn't eat, when I left quietly after a glass of wine, the staff would remember it. The sad husband stood up by his wife. Another layer of truth to bury the lie. Back home, I poured myself a double shot of bourbon and sat in the dark. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It was too clean, too quiet. Like a hotel room I'd overstayed in. Carlos had told me to be patient, that the life sentence he promised her had only just begun. And I trusted him. He never failed. But Denton was sniffing around harder now. He came back 2 days later with more questions. This time, he sat in my living room and looked me dead in the eye. "We're not officially closing the Tolson case," he said. "But, between you and me, it's going cold." "Shame," I murmured. He nodded. "Still, it's strange, don't you think? Your wife disappears right after his murder." I stared at him, my expression a mix of confusion and frustration. "You think she was involved?" "She was on our suspect list," he admitted. "We just never had enough." He stood, adjusted his coat. "If she contacts you, even just a postcard from Brazil, you call me immediately." I nodded. "Of course." After he left, I went upstairs and opened the closet. Her clothes still hung neatly, shoes lined up, jewelry untouched. The scent of her perfume still clung to the fabric. And yet, she was as good as dead. For the world, Laura Kennelly had run away in disgrace, leaving behind a husband, a home, and a mess of unanswered questions. But I knew better. I knew she was still alive, and I knew she'd never be free again. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Laura vanished. The headlines had faded. The police were quieter. Detective Denton stopped dropping by unannounced, though I knew he hadn't let it go. He was the type who didn't like loose ends, and I was the frayed thread he couldn't quite snip. I played my role. I called her office once a week. I dropped by Calcas Realty just to check in on her coworkers. I made sure everyone saw me as the grieving, abandoned husband, lost but hopeful. Privately, though, I was calm. I slept well. I drank a little too much, but only to pass the time. I didn't dream of her anymore. I didn't hear her voice in the halls or see her in the shadows. The ghost of her had finally left the house. Then came the note, slipped beneath a pizza box on a Friday night, delivered by some teenage kid who didn't even glance at me. Inside was a simple, handwritten message. St. Peter's Church, 10 a.m. Mass. Slip out the east side during communion. Your final confirmation awaits. No signature, but I knew who it was from. Carlos. It was time. That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but anticipation. I kept going over what I would say, what I wouldn't. Would I shout? Would I gloat? Or would silence say it all? St. Peter's was packed the next morning. Hundreds of parishioners filled the pews. I blended in, dressed conservatively, head down, lips moving with practiced prayer. I watched the priest carefully, waiting for communion. When the line began to form, I slipped quietly out the side. There, as promised, was a black Ford Crown Victoria. Windows tinted, engine running. I climbed into the back without hesitation. The driver didn't look at me, didn't speak, just nodded, and we took off into the city. 10 minutes later, we pulled up beside a quiet warehouse. Red brick, rusted steel doors, the kind of place no one notices unless they're told to look. Inside was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint tap of footsteps from deeper within. Carlos stepped out from a shadowed doorway like a ghost in human skin. "JC," he said with a small nod. "Carmine says I can call you that." I shook his hand. "You sure about this?" he asked, eyes steady. "She's not the same." "I'm not here for who she is now," I replied. "I'm here to remind her who she was." He motioned toward the far end of the room. "She's waiting." We walked in silence down the corridor, the echoes of our footsteps bouncing off empty concrete walls. Finally, we entered a small, windowless room. And there she was, Laura, tied to a chair. Clean, but not neat. Sober, but shattered. Her once fiery eyes were dull now, haunted. Her hair hung limp at her shoulders. Her lips trembled slightly as I approached, but she didn't speak, didn't flinch, didn't plead. I stepped in front of her and took a long breath. "You remember this place?" I asked softly. "No, of course not. But this is where your new story starts." She didn't answer, just stared past me, to a wall that had no future for her. I circled slowly, hands behind my back. "You had a choice, Laura. You always did. But you made the worst one. You picked lies. You picked betrayal. And you picked him. Still nothing. Not a sound." I crouched down, leaned in close. "Robert paid his debt. Yours will take longer." Her body shivered slightly. I stood up and looked her in the eye. "I want you to remember what it felt like, the day you saw that headline. The coffee spilling from your mouth. The panic in your bones. That was the moment your old life died." A single tear welled in her right eye and slid down her cheek. "That's it," I whispered. "That's all I needed to see." Carlos stepped back into the room, watching from the doorway. "She'll be well taken care of. Like the prize livestock they ship out to the ranches. Not loved, but fed. Not beaten, but broken." I nodded. Turning back to Laura one last time, I said, "Enjoy the quiet, Laura. You always hated the noise of me." Then I walked out. The ride back to St. Peter's was silent. I slipped into the rear of the church just as the 11 o'clock Mass was ending, blending once more into the sea of faces. By the time I got home, the bourbon was waiting. So was the silence. And it was peaceful, not triumphant, not euphoric, just quiet. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was just one tear on a broken face and the click of a door that would never open again. It had been 3 years since I last laid eyes on Laura. No police follow-ups. No mysterious notes. No late-night phone calls. The world moved on, and so did I, at least on the outside. The neighbors assumed she'd run off with a lover. Some whispered she'd met a tragic end. But no one dared ask me. Not directly. Her name slowly disappeared from my mailbox, from her office door at Calcas Realty, from every corner of the life we once shared. Detective Denton's visits stopped. His questions dried up. Her case fell into the cold files, buried under layers of bureaucracy and other unsolved disappearances. The only thing that remained was a quiet hush every time her name was mentioned, as if saying it aloud might bring her ghost walking through the front door. I sold the house. Too many memories poisoned the walls. Too many shadows whispered her name late at night. I didn't need that. Not anymore. I moved into a condo overlooking the Monongahela River. Clean. Minimal. Just me, a stocked bar, and a locked drawer filled with shredded regrets. Most nights, I found myself at the Sweet Kitty Lounge with Carmine. The same place where temptation once danced in front of me in red stilettos now felt like a sanctuary. I'd made peace with who I was, and more importantly, who I wasn't. Marriage? Off the table. Love? Buried with my trust. I wasn't interested in commitment anymore. The world had shown me too much. Too many secrets hidden behind pretty smiles. Too many lies whispered between lovers. I'd seen behind the curtain. I knew what played in the dark corners of people's hearts. But fate, in its twisted sense of humor, wasn't done with me. One night, while sipping bourbon under the neon haze of the club's sign, Carmine leaned in. "You ever find out who sent you those photos of Laura and Robert?" he asked. I shook my head. Never cared. All that mattered was what they showed me. Carmine chuckled. "You might want to care. Amanda Stata, Robert's ex. She's the one who sent them." I blinked. That name hadn't passed my lips in years. Amanda had been quiet, low profile. But now, knowing she'd been the spark that ignited everything, it shifted something inside me. "She was his girl before he dumped her for Laura," Carmine said. "Guess she wanted her revenge, same as you." I leaned back in my chair, letting the truth settle. Funny how vengeance loops back around like that. Amanda had lost Robert to Laura, and I had lost Laura to Robert. Two broken hearts stitching revenge into the same fabric. Different threads. Same bloody pattern. I never thanked Amanda. Probably never would. But I owed her more than I admitted. It was then I realized, none of this happened by accident. Every piece of the puzzle had been moved by someone's hand. Mine. Amanda's. Carmine's. Even Laura's. We were all complicit in the collapse. And still, I slept well. Carmine tipped his glass toward me. "To second chances." I raised mine, but didn't drink. "There are no second chances, Carmine. Just better exits." By the end of that week, I closed the last account Laura and I had ever shared. Even the bank no longer asked about her. To them, she was just another vanished spouse in their database. A ghost. But ghosts had a way of whispering when you least expected it. One evening, while watching the Steelers game, I received an email with no sender. Subject, forgotten, but not gone. Attached was a single photo. Laura, tied to a chair again, but in a different room. Older, thinner, eyes hollowed out by time and despair. There was no message, no explanation. Just the image. Carlos was keeping his word. It should have disturbed me. Instead, I felt nothing. No anger. No joy. No guilt. Just silence. I closed the laptop and poured myself another drink. Whatever remained of Laura was no longer my concern. Her punishment was eternal. Her prison didn't have bars, but she'd never escape it. Not in this lifetime. She brought that upon herself. Robert paid with his life. Laura paid with her soul. And me? I paid with my heart. But it was a price I could live with. Some might call it justice. Others would call it cold-blooded revenge. I called it peace. And after everything, I'd finally found it. It was a Tuesday morning, gray skies casting a dull hue over the river outside my condo. The kind of morning where the world feels heavier, slower. I stood by the window with my coffee, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed once, a private number. I let it ring out. A few seconds later, a text appeared. "Meet me where it all began. 1 hour. Alone. No signature. No further details. But I knew. There was only one place where it all began. St. Peter's Catholic Church. The place where I'd married Laura. Where I'd said vows I meant, and where she lied with her smile. It was poetic in a sick way. Of course it would end there. An hour later, I stepped inside the chapel. The air was cold, dust floating like ghosts in the sunlight slicing through stained glass. I sat in the back pew, my hand instinctively resting over my side, where I once kept a pistol, long before I became a man who traded bullets for silence. The door creaked open. Soft footsteps echoed on the marble floor. I didn't have to look. I knew it was her. Laura. But not the Laura I remembered. She looked like a shadow wearing her skin, pale, eyes sunken, lips dry and cracked. There was no arrogance, no fire, no seduction in her stride. Just a trembling woman trying to gather pieces of a shattered self. She slid into the pew across from mine and said nothing. Just stared at me, waiting. "I wasn't sure you were still breathing," I finally said. "I didn't think I'd get the chance to explain," she whispered. "You don't have to. But I want to." I turned, met her eyes. "Then make it quick." She took a deep breath. "I loved you, JC. I swear I did. But I was broken. I don't expect you to understand, but I wasn't whole. And Robert, he made me feel alive again. Until he didn't." I smirked bitterly. "You think that justifies betrayal?" "No," she said. "But maybe it explains it." I shook my head. "You had everything, Laura. A husband who loved you. A future. And you traded it for motel sheets and cheap thrills." "I thought you were cheating on me," she blurted. I froze. "What?" "I convinced myself you had someone in Atlanta." That's why you were gone so often. That's why you stopped touching me. I spiraled. And Robert, he was there. It was so pathetic I almost laughed. So instead of asking me, you decided to punish me. With your body. With your lies. She didn't answer. I leaned forward. Do you know what it felt like, getting that email? Seeing you like that? I've killed people in my past, Laura. Bad men. But nothing prepared me for the kind of pain you inflicted. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not hate. Not pity. Just the dull ache of memory. I'm not here to beg, she said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I needed to see you. To say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I nodded slowly. Carlos let you go, huh? He said it was time, she whispered. That you'd already made your decision. He told me I could try to rebuild. Somewhere far away. I looked at her carefully. You're going to disappear, then? She gave a small, shaky nod. Good, I said. Because if I ever see you again, I won't be so merciful. She stood up, wiping her face with trembling fingers. I understand. As she turned to leave, I stopped her with a final question. Why here, Laura? Why the church? She looked over her shoulder. Because this is the only place where I ever told the truth. And just like that, she walked out of my life one last time. I stayed in that pew for a long time after she was gone. The bells rang noon. A few elderly parishioners wandered in. I sat there like a statue, letting it all wash over me. This was the final chapter. There would be no police, no revenge, no more secrets, only silence, only peace. By the end of the week, I moved again, this time to Miami. Carmine helped me set up a business importing specialty wines from Italy. Something simple, clean, a fresh start. One night, after closing up the shop, I stood on the beach watching the sun sink into the horizon. A little boy ran past me, laughing, chasing a kite. His father called after him, grinning. For a brief moment, I wondered what kind of father I could have been. But that was a life I left behind in Pittsburgh. That was a life with Laura. As the wind picked up, I whispered her name into the ocean breeze. And then I let it go. Forever. In the quiet that followed Laura's final departure, I found myself reflecting not on vengeance, but on the wreckage we'd left behind. What did it all mean? What did I learn through the fire? The truth is, love without honesty is a loaded gun. And trust, once shattered, leaves splinters that never truly heal. If I could offer any wisdom, especially to those older and walking the twilight roads of life, it would be this. Never ignore the little silences. The way someone stops saying, I love you, or comes home a little later each night. Listen to your gut. It's the only voice that doesn't lie. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not always about setting the other person free. Sometimes it's about setting yourself free. I never got that closure from Laura, not the kind I wanted. But I found something better, clarity and peace. To those who've loved and lost, been betrayed, or broken, know this. You're still standing. That means there's life left to live. Don't waste it in bitterness. Let go. Heal. And remember, loyalty, once given, should never be taken lightly. Not by you, and not by the one you love.